The President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, swore in a new ministerial cabinet for the third time in 6 months in power. In Ecuador, the Ministry of Education suspended on-site classes in Quito amid national mourning following a flood that left at least 25 dead and some 12 people reported missing. President Vladimir Putin accused the United States and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, of offering inadequate responses to the demands made by Russia regarding the security situation on its border with Ukraine. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the informations and the news today. The President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, swears in a new cabinet with a new Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and Foreign Affairs Minister for the third time in his 6 months in power. Castillo reorganized his government after the surprise resignation of the Chief of Staff, Mirta Vázquez, due to disagreements over promotions in the police force, and appointed lawyer César Landa Arroyo as the head of the Peruvian diplomacy and the economist Oscar Graham as the head of finance. The 6-month government have been characterized by frequent internal struggles within it and attacks from the most radical sectors of the right-wing opposition. Pedro Castillo sent a message to the current cabinet in which he ratified the commitment to work for Peru, prioritizing the needs of all Peruvians and the major reforms that will consolidate the national welfare. Educators in Colombia mobilized to demand better salaries and also sanitary conditions to allow the resumption of classes in the country in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Teachers rallied in front of the health company that assists educators in Bogotá. During the day, the activists denounced that the Ministry of Education ordered the resumption of classes in the classrooms despite the non-compliance of sanitary conditions to avoid the spread of the virus. They also denounced that teachers are forced to go to work despite being infected by COVID-19. They also warned that this situation caused more than 700,000 students and 32,000 teachers to be infected by the virus. The protesters assured that in spite of this situation, the national government doesn't meet their demands. This Wednesday, the Venezuelan National Assembly appointed the committee that will lead the selection process to choose the magistrates for the Supreme Court of Justice. The list of 86 people that make up the committee will be chaired by Deputy Giuseppe Alessandriello, and they will be in charge of determining how the selection will be proceeding. The Venezuelan parliament announced that it was evaluating those nominated by the civil society to join the judiciary system. The committee must select also the General Inspectorate of Courts, the director of the National Judiciary School. The Assembly evaluated 104 candidates and ultimately chose 86 who were sworn in by the President of the National Assembly, Deputy Jorge Rodriguez.
In consideration, those deputies who agreed to approve these nominees, analyzed and brought to this hemicycle by the Preliminary Commission to form the Judicial Nomination Committee that will be in charge of appointing the new magistrates of the Supreme Court of Justice, as well as the General Inspectorate of Courts and the Director of the National Judiciary School, please indicate so with the standard sign. It is hereby approved. The Judicial Nominations Committee is hereby formed as established in the Constitution of the Republic of Venezuela and the Organic Law of the Supreme Court of Justice. Please Deputy Giuseppe Alessandriello, who will lead the committee with the vice presidency of Deputy José Tregrosio Correa, please install the committee tomorrow in order to establish the mechanism of its operation and the bodies of the preliminary committee to be sworn in at the ordinary session of next Thursday.
Elections in Costa Rica are welcome with hope or excitement by less than half of eligible voters, according to a survey by the University of Costa Rica's Center for Political Studies and Investigations. In the polls conducted by the Research Center, 46% of the voters surveyed described they were hopeful or excited with the current presidential candidates, while the remaining 54% described their feelings regarding the turnout as ones with negative connotations. Of the 3.5 million voters expected to participate in Sunday's elections, 17% of them will cast their vote for ex-President Figueres of the Social Democrat National Liberation Party. According to the study, while Lineth Saborío of the Christian Unity Party follows second in intention with 12.8%. Other candidates who will qualify for second round, as shown by the survey's data, are Fabricio Ojeda of the New Republic, Rodrigo Chávez of Democratic Progress, and José María Villalta of the Broad Front. The Barrio 23 de Enero, 23rd of January neighborhood, January 23rd, in Caracas, was center stage in the events of February 4th, 1992. With this rebellious tradition, the neighborhood's residents remember the date and uphold the identity and political legacy of Hugo Chavez. Let's dive into this quarter in the following story.
The hills west of Caracas are the traditional image of the barrio known as 23 de Enero. This is an architectural landmark of the 50s. The quarter's residents have been key participants of huge political events like the fight against 1958 dictatorship, the Caracazo of 1998, and the uprising of February 4th, 1992, as well as the resistance post to the coup d'etat of 2002. Today this area is the site of the mountain headquarters known as El Cuartel de la Montaña, where the remains of Comandante Hugo Chavez rest. The residents here remember the events that transpired 30 years ago, those related to the military uprising that put Chavez's name in the eyes of history. That window to my left, well, I was leaping there and I started hearing noises. Since I know what a caliber 50 sounds like, I think to myself, this sounds ugly. I look out the window and I see something big's going down, but in Miraflores, I can see all the way there. A friend of mine passes by driving his car and he shouts, "There's a coup! It's a military!" I turn on the lights in the house and the balcony. Like 15 minutes or so go by and I hear the boots of the rebels coming this way and I can see them stationing at strategic points. The sudden appearance of Chavez in Venezuela's political environment was an absolute game changer. The residents here remember his famous speech after the attempted coup because of his, for the time being, words taken as a promise of hope for those who yearned a change in the country. For the time being means we have to start working as we must. We have to be more conscientious and that the fight is pretty tough. Like he said, this is not a one-day fight. It takes a long time and we are looking at it. Chavez is still present in this neighborhood and all those other neighborhoods in Venezuela. Speeches, political upbringing, social works, and symbols. Thousands today are social and political leaders inspired by his teachings and leftist ideals.
I never forget about 4F because I was born again there. To me, it was like a new beginning. Until this day,
Comandante Chavez turned the country into one big school and university. We all come from that. Those of us fellows who have been in a revolution, we have been educated with Comandante Chavez. After his death, he left a lot of content on video format and in writing, and we are learning from that and growing strong with it, trying to organize our ranks because Chavez's strategy was to organize the people who were scattered. It's already been 20 years of a Bolivarian revolution, a project that for 6 years faces sanctions from the United States seen as aggressions carried out to make people yield and give up on the Chavez project.
those of us who believe in him and follow his legacy will keep working to make this country of ours grow stronger. We will never change. We are going to be here resisting whatever comes, despite the pain I feel whenever he comes to mind. I will use that to keep fighting for my country from inside its borders.
El Barrio 23 de Enero continues to reassert Chavez and his political ideals, a history of struggle and resistance.
Leonel Retamal, TeleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
Thank you, Lionel, for this report, and we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. In Ecuador, the Ministry of Education suspended non-signed classes in Quito amid national mourning following a flood that left at least 25 dead and some 12 people reported missing. The ministry ordered the interruption of the teaching process in 7 schools in the sector of La Gasca, located in the Ecuadorian capital, in order to carry out cleaning and restoration work in these educational centers after the mayor, Santiago Guarderas, declared 3 days of mourning on Tuesday. In a press release, the official instance expressed his solidarity with the injured and the affected community. In this context, rescue, salvage, and cleanup brigades are working continuously to assist some 2,800 people affected and more than 340 victims of the phenomenon. In the Ecuadorian capital, the rescue and recovery of the bodies left by the mudslide of last Monday continues, one of the worst since 1975. Let's see more details with Henry Pillajo.
It is ground zero. A flag of Ecuador was raised here in honor of the victims of the flood of great magnitude. As the hours go by, news are not encouraging. Specialized units locate the body of a victim. On the second day after the tragedy, the weather conditions favored the joint work of hundreds of volunteers, members of the armed forces, police and rescuers, as well as the deployment of heavy machinery to remove as much debris as possible from the affected structures.
Our houses are practically destroyed. The walls are down. Well, we have been able to stabilize our house a little bit. The gates bent, and the mud got all the way in.
At the same time, pain and memories are present among those affected.
It was a shocking sound. At the time we went out to the corner and we saw the waves passing, and many people were stuck here at the police checkpoint. What we did was to help people, and we saved 2 who were over here and 2 more behind, and other people from here, from this sector.
The trace of the mudslide that opened and destroyed everything in its path remains almost intact in some areas, and some believe it very difficult to recover.
It will take a long time for the park to return the way it was before. Even in terms of mood, it will be not the same.
Nearby, this collection center was set up as a strategic point to assemble and distribute humanitarian aid to kits donated for the families affected by the disaster.
About 2,000 people at least we have to reach to deliver the aid that continues to arrive this week.
Most of the affected families have been relocated to different parts of the capital city, while the search efforts will continue in the coming hours.
Henry Pillajo, TeleSUR, Ecuador.
Thank you, Henry, for this report, and now we continue. Tropical Hurricane Batsirai is gaining intensity and is expected to pass north of the island of Mauritius on Wednesday in the night and make landfall over central Madagascar on Saturday afternoon, reported by forecasters. Thousands of homes were left without power in Mauritius on Wednesday as powerful winds from the hurricane battered the island from the Indian Ocean. At least 7,500 homes were reported without power service. The telephone network was also affected, and schools ought to remain closed, extending the November shutdown due to the spread of the Omicron variant. But Batsirai follows in the wake of Tropical Storm Anna, which formed last week and killed numerous people in Mozambique, Malawi, and Madagascar. The governments of China and Argentina signed a contract valued in $8 million for the construction of a fourth nuclear and electric power plant in the South American country. The agreement for the construction of the Atucha 3 power plant was signed between the Argentine Nuclear and Electric Energy State Company and the National Nuclear Corporation of China. The compound will have a half-life of 60 years and is said to be built in the city of Lima, 100 kilometers north of Buenos Aires. This new structure will supply the nation with 200 megawatts of rain power and has opened up 7,000 new jobs opportunities. During the signing of the contract, the governor of the province of Buenos Aires, Axel Kilisov, reminded that 2004 and in 2005 progress was made for the making of the power plant. Until later on, the work was halted by executive orders of President Mauricio Macri. The announcement of the new deal comes on the eve of President Alberto Fernandez's trip to Beijing. Argentine Foreign Minister Santiago Cafiero committed to continuous efforts to expand all-round cooperation with China. In an exclusive interview with China Global Television Network, noting the bilateral relations are at the stage of rapid development. He said Argentina is strengthening cooperation with the Asian country, not only in economic and trade exchanges, but also in areas of culture, health, education, science and technology. Cafiero also appreciated China's aid and support in Argentina's fight against COVID-19 with large quantities of donations of medical supplies and equipment and providing large amounts of vaccines. In Brazil, the number of deaths rise to 28 as a result of the storm that struck the state of Sao Paulo. Local authorities of the city Franco da Rocha reported on the discovery of the bodies of 3 people who were buried after a landslide. Officials said that there are still 7 missing persons, which is why the fire corps, civil defense and volunteer groups continue to search and rescue. Heavy rains have been recorded since last Saturday and have caused floods and structural damage. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 26 people died after the fall of a high-voltage cable, during a storm in the capital Kinshasa. According to the reconstruction of the facts, the cable broke and the leaf end fell into a ditch that filled with water after the rain in the morning hours within the area of the popular food market Matadi Kibala, west of the city. Among the deceased were merchants and customers, in addition to some bystanders. Authorities announced the opening of an investigation to establish responsibility for the event, in addition to the start of work to relocate the market. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. On Wednesday, President Vladimir Putin accused the United States and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, of offering inadequate responses to the demands made by Russia regarding the security situation on its border with Ukraine. A Spanish outlet leaked confidential documents with the answers that the United States and NATO offered to the Russian demands. In these files, the Biden administration and the Western allies asked the Kremlin to begin the withdrawal of its troops, but they did not renounce the possibility entry of Ukraine into NATO. Putin said it is clear that fundamental Russian concerns ended up being ignored, and warned about the fact that Ukraine itself is just an instrument through which the United States executes a containment policy aimed at restricting Russia's development. Some 3,000 people in Syria have normalized their legal status as part of the reconciliation process led by President Bashar al-Assad in Raqqa province. The reconciliation process continues in Raqqa province as members of the armed groups submit themselves to the pardon and regularize their legal status since the start of the reconciliation process launched by the Syrian government on November 14th. Almost 3,000 residents of this locality have laid down their weapons and surrendered to the authorities despite the obstacles of the US-backed militia, the FTS, which is trying to prevent them from joining the process. Former military who voluntarily surrendered to the competent authorities, that is, those who joined the reconciliation process, can finally return to their regular lives. Taxi drivers and public transportation vehicles in Lebanon blocked roads on Wednesday as part of a 3-day strike to protest over the decline of the population's living conditions. The second strike of its sort of 3 weeks forced schools, universities and many shops to close. The strike, organized by the public transportation and labor unions, paralyzed the capital, whose streets were eerily quiet. The drivers, who are demanding that the state provide them with subsidized fuel again, also closed some roads with burning tires. The government ended the state aid in October, a move that came amid a devastating economic crisis. Last week, the World Bank said that Lebanon's economy contracted by more than 58%, warning in a report that the small country's financial meltdown poses a threat to long-term stability and social peace.
Unions that are working on this action, the strike. Of course, if we do not reach an outcome today, we're going to continue. We don't have any other option. If in 3 days we do not achieve what we want, there might be an escalation. All we would do is implement the union's decisions. We as drivers in general are in pain, so we are going to continue because there is no other option. The goal is to make this state feel for these drivers who cannot afford their daily bread, for the taxi drivers who, while working in the taxis, are now looking for iron to sell or some wood to collect and sell.
Now we address other topics. New Zealand will not fully reopen its borders until October, as it cautiously dismantles some of the world's toughest pandemic border restrictions, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said on Thursday.
Vaccinated Kiwis and other currently eligible travellers from Australia will be able to travel to New Zealand from 11:59 p.m. Sunday, 27 February. And instead of going into MIQ, we'll be able to self-isolate.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.